finding a quorum so that we can talk about our athletics, trying to reopen them. Just a few general statements I'd like to make. I want you all as a board to know that Mr. Steiner has worked diligently with Mark Andrews, and welcome Mark Andrew as the new athletic director at Henderson County High School.
Come on.
Yes. Hired last week and said, here's new guidelines. I mean, literally. We got them in print last Friday night at 6 o'clock. So it's been, they've both worked very hard at this. And just so you all know, in the conversations we've had, that we expect, the administration, I expect our coaches, our athletic directors, and our principals to abide by these guidelines. I understand that those guidelines could be hard at times to implement, but when we reopen our child cares, our athletics, or our school, it doesn't matter. The safety and the health of students and staff is the utmost importance. So we expect that. We emphasize that the activities for athletics at this point are not mandatory. They are not. It's in capital letters throughout the documents, and we've emphasized that to coaches and principals. It's not mandatory right now. Consistency in communication we know is critical. And I just also will share, as of 11:58 today, the health department, Clay Horton, has approved our plans. And I just want to read the email to you all so you have some guidance of what that looks like. So his response were, the all sports guidance and expectations are excellent, the piece that Mr. Steiner is presenting to you all. The individual plans look good too. Some of the individual plans referred only to temperature checks. And so he suggests, and we agree, so we give that feedback to Mr. Andrews, that they would emphasize that they need to screen for symptoms and COVID exposures as well. And then he lists 4 questions to ask and then check the temp. And so I will send this right to Mr. Andrews, and I know that he'll make sure that there's a spreadsheet that every coach and every athlete are asked that every day that they come in contact. So, Mr. Steiner?
Basically, as she said, we received the KHSAA guidelines on a Friday evening. We had originally scheduled to meet on a Thursday, but once they released something, everybody and their brother is ready to jump. And so we moved that from Thursday up to Monday to have a meeting with athletic directors and principals at our secondary schools. That KHSAA original document is 13 pages of the small type. And so what she asked me to do, Ms. Stanley asked me to do, is try to give us a basic guideline from a district point of view up here looking down to be able to say this is what we expect. And so that's what I've tried to do on the page that you see that Robin has up now. I've narrowed that down to about 3 pages, understanding that there is more stuff behind it. Anytime we talk about athletics, it's extremely important that we get it right, just because of the sheer nature of what we're doing. And so I tried to give you as much information that is pertinent to what we're doing right now. And that's what I shared. So I'll go over it with you just a little bit, but I wanted to make sure the expectation was all previous KHSAA requirements regarding, but not limited to, heat index, which is a huge one, temperatures, and those checks that we do, hydration, safety procedures, trainings, all of that is ongoing just like it always has been, just like it should be. And that's still an expectation. From that point forward, I pulled from the regs given to us by KHSAA basic highlights of what they've outlined as requirements. So the first one's facilities cleaning. Pulled that wording straight from their principles. And there are pretty specific things on how often and what to use even. That's regarding facilities cleaning. There's entrance and exit procedures for when kids come onto the facility, into their coaches' areas, into their sport areas. There are limits of size groups. This is the one we had the biggest frustration with until recently, as in maybe about an hour ago. There was disagreement on what that first line on limits of group size meant. No gathering of more than 10 people at a time, inside or outside, prior to June 29th. So we had that question, and we couldn't get an answer until about an hour ago, and then somebody finally got us an answer from Mr. Tackett that said it was our understanding originally that a coach could have 10 kids, and that's all he could have at one time. And they were limiting the people in that area for the 10 come in, 10 go out, another 10 come in and go out. We've gotten some clarity in just the last little bit, in the last hour or so, and it said, no, you can do the old-fashioned kind of a wheel effect where one coach is here, one coach is here, one coach is there, and those 10 students can go from place to place to place. Yeah, that's quite a bit different than what we've been doing since March. So that creates a little anxiety, to be honest. But if we've given approval and our plans have been approved by the health department, then we can move forward that as long as we continue to do that. I just wanted to let you know that there was some discussion on that, and when it's worded there, I didn't want you to look at that and go, wait a minute, this says 10, and now all of a sudden I drive by the practice fields and I see 100 kids out there. That is okay. Screenings, I think that's what Ms. Stanley was just referring to. Anybody that's 100.4 or above, you're not allowed in. You'll go home, and there are certain questions to ask. I believe it's pretty much the same exact questions we ask everybody as they come to work each day. There are face coverings, just to kind of give you an idea of the face coverings. Coaches are to wear those at all times. Students are wearing it, our athletes are wearing it in and wearing it out. When they're participating, they can take that mask down. If they're standing on the sideline doing nothing, they're supposed to have that on. So that's, once again, if you drive by or you hear somebody calls you and says, hey, they didn't have masks on, that's acceptable as long as they're doing certain things. So coaches are aware of that, and you probably saw that on their plans that you have. Hygiene practices, once again, that's stuff that we have to emphasize to our students and our athletes that this is what we do. Hydration is extremely important. You know, from not doing anything from March until, this is June, and now heat's going up, and it's going to be extremely important that we are focused on that. So those are just basic, straightforward guidelines that I wanted you to see. The next level, and it seems like there is a next level for our weight room expectations. In the weight room expectations, I've listed those basic parts, but then also I think you'll see there is a section in there that says, hey, you have to follow, it's the first bullet there. Schools will be guided by information obtained by state guidance and fitness centers. And that link, when you click on that link, it would take you to what Robin has as well, which is that right there. That piece of paper, I've gone through and highlighted the things that stood out to me, and basically my page turned yellow because there are some extremely important pieces of that, and so we've shared that with Mark, and he's going to share it with anybody that's in the weight rooms. These are the things that need to be done, and it'd be my suggestion too, and probably a good idea that once they set up the weight room, and I should have said something to you before this, but once you set up the weight room, I'd even take a picture of it or two to be able to prove if there's ever any question how much space we have, or this one's been marked off so that we can't get that close. But I think that's a suggestion in there somewhere. So, but there are a lot of requirements, and it's going to take a lot of work. Our coaches are committed to kids, there's no doubt, and they're going to have to be committed to following these regs to make sure that sometimes students and sometimes athletes don't think long-term, and we have to do it for them. And so when we made these guidelines, when we're trying to make sure that all this information is to you, it's for the fact that, sometimes we feel like we got to go a step beyond and make sure everybody's good and make sure everybody's going to follow what we need them to follow. So I submit that to you today as an overarching guide to what we'll be doing and what we'll be monitoring. There are more specific guides in here, but Mark has a copy of those. And I will say that Clay and Ryan, Clay Bowling and Ryan Pinkston also have those. It's North and South's academic team. Tommy's aware of them, and Mr. Ransom, and Mr. Rush and Mr. Eastham as well. So all of those are on the same page. They've all seen this document. We've all had conversations, and it'll be up to them now to kind of further this along to make sure that we're following it. So submit that to you as our overarching theme and ask for approval for it. And I'll also entertain any questions you have, or if I missed something, Mark or Ms. Stanley, on that.
One thing else I think I would mention is that we are including band
Yes.
in these exact same guidelines. And then we did have a question about academic team. So if anybody wants to come in contact with students, they have to follow these guidelines.
And to be honest,
Anyone.
and you may be going to say it in 10 seconds, and I shouldn't have said anything, but band is even further. It's 10 feet instead of 6 for our, the woodwinds. Right, yeah. So they'll have to be spaced out, and then it's one of those suggestions, guidelines that they provide. And yes, I think I shared with Tommy or Mark, or maybe it was just you, Ms. Stanley, I think anybody that plans to meet with kids has to go by our overarching themes at this point until we get anything new. And the last page in our handbook that I wanted to share with you is there are different timelines, and on those timelines, it's the groups are split into low touch outdoor, low touch indoor, high touch outdoor, and high touch indoor. And then at the base of that page, I hope I've given you, yes, are somewhat of a guide or a team designation for what that is. July the 12th, is the last day that they've given us guidelines. And to be honest, that's been a little bit frustrating, I'm sure, for coaches, for
What does that mean?
Okay, I'm sorry.
June 29th through July 12th, expectations for low touch, July 13th through July 31st. I've read everything you've given to us.
Okay.
I've got several questions. If
Sure.
I could, when I get time, it's my time. But I didn't quite understand what that meant at the
Okay.
bottom of those.
Go to the top of that page there, Robin. Okay, the timeline is split into those four areas of sports. So a low-touch outdoor sport at the bottom of the page tells you which one it is, a low-touch outdoor. So then now you go back up to the June the 1st through the 14th. There are guidelines that are listed for those days, and there are approved things that each one of those 4 designated sports areas can do from June the 1st through June the 14th. And basically, and I think that's what you'll see on those plans, but basically June 1st through the 14th is coaches you can meet and you can share your plan as long as you do it in a certain way. The 15th is when the actual workouts will begin. So the expectations are different from June 1 to 14, and then June 15 to 28, there are different expectations. And then June 29th through the 12th, there are different expectations.
Okay, I understand now.
Now that when you get to July 13th, there's nothing written yet. And I just didn't want to go into those because I knew
Pretty
you were gonna
simple on
get
Powell Street. But I
well,
don't quite understand.
you just got to know what it is, and I apologize for not explaining that better. But probably one of the things that's interesting is that the rules seem to adjust the more we know, and so it's tough to make a final call on things. But we're trying to get us safe entrance back. Sorry.
So we won't have to have a separate approval for band. Band is going to be considered in that last category? Outdoor, so even though they're not a sport, they're still considered in this set of guidelines?
I placed them in there
Okay,
just because, to me, that's where they'll be.
right, okay.
They're not allowed indoors at this point in
Right.
time anyways.
Right.
And so my expectation, kind of with Tommy, would be, hey, when that group meets, they have to have a plan, and it has to come to us, and it'll have to fit into these guides. And Ms. Stanley can say whether or not it has to come specifically back before them or not, but as long as they fall into these guides and they'll do what we're asking them to do here, and it's similar to what other coaches are doing, I'm comfortable with that as best I can.
That's fine. I was just making sure that we didn't have to have a separate set of
Yes, ma'am.
rules. But I agree, that's fine. Yeah, just clarifying. Okay. Okay, so any other questions, Mr. West? Or Kirk?
Go with. Are we going to provide a waiver that can be signed for parents and the kids that are coming, just acknowledging that the
awareness.
environment is what it is, and if you do,
Yeah, each,
act anything or,
each coach will have a parent meeting or be sharing different ways of what their expectations are coming forward. Everything has to be voluntary. We share what our expectations are. And yes, we could provide in that stuff that coaches give out at the very beginning, hey, we understand this is going on. Is it your expectation if we follow these rules and regs, you're good with them coming? And they could sign that, and it would be pretty much like participation. There was one question that was given to me saying, what if, and you can what if all days, but we need to answer them as best we can from an athletic director and said, what if a parent says, I want my kid to wear a mask all the time? Well, they've removed the dead period, what's called the dead period. I'm sure you guys are aware of that, about 2-week window that everything was shut down, first part of July. To me, and this is the way I answered it, is I said, well, you got two possibilities. If a parent says, I want my kid to wear, and this was a cross-country scenario he gave me, I want my kid to wear a mask at all times. And I said, you got two possibilities. Have a parent sign a waiver that says, I want my kid to wear a mask all the time, knowing they're going to be running in a mask. Or if that coach or that athletic director and that principal feels like, I don't want to put a kid in a mask running 2 miles in 94-degree heat, then you give that parent the understanding that, okay, here's what we're running today. They need to run elsewhere because we don't want to be responsible for them if it's going to be this hot and you're asking them to wear a mask. I gave him those two options, and at that point he said, okay, that's what we'll go with at this point. If I have any questions, I'll call you back. So we'll field some of those questions, I'm sure, on things like that, but that's the way I answered it at this point.
well, and so my daughter's gone back to gymnastics. We had to sign a release saying that we wouldn't hold them liable if we were to somehow contract
Sure.
corona. That was, and maybe Ms. Bird might
Yeah.
opine on that a little bit.
If it is the board's pleasure for us to do that, and that's a good thing for us to do right now, absolutely, we can.
Generally, when they have a coaches meeting, they give out the drug and alcohol policy. They give out the rules and expectations for that individual sport, and they keep documentation where a parent signs that they were advised of these expectations, guidelines, and they received a copy. So adding that in there is probably the simplest way to do. We add waivers for everything. That doesn't mean we're going to get sued. It's just another way of documenting that we advise parents that there's a known risk and they're willing to accept that risk. And it's, as much as anything, just documenting the conversation was had. So I think that's, sure.
And then as far as the checklist that you said they're going to do, is there going to be some way to track the kids that have gone through the temperature and the checklist? Like I know some organizations hand out like a bracelet each day when everybody's gone through everything and been okayed.
Okay.
Is there something in place to track who's been temperature taken and checklist taken?
Probably a good idea. We haven't, I really haven't seen that in place, and all we've gone on is like at our building, the honor system. If you come in and you check it and you have to have somebody sign off and move forward. But in this case, with that many students, over 10, you're talking maybe 50 kids or 60 kids at a time. It would probably be easy if you stamped them or something on that
Stamp or
arm
something visible for the other coaches that are there to know that, the kid's partaking in it. He's already gone through everything, or he or she.
Yeah, and documentation wise, how we're gonna do that, Mark is trying to weigh that out, whether that's gonna be a Google Doc, whether that makes the most sense, or if it's gonna be paper pencil, or it may be a combination of both, because, you know, our golf team may be somewhere that they don't have access to, you know, some of this, but there may be a way that they can do that, and he's trying to figure out the best way to document so that he has a copy and the coach keeps a copy of which kids have been through and when, and they'll document which groups, which kid is in which group with which coach and all that as well. So yes, sir. But I think that is a good point to bring up with the stamp or a wristband or something. So, yes, sir.
Okay, so our coaches are outstanding. Lots of impressive work here. I appreciate that from everybody involved. So if a student athlete has a temperature or indicates they have symptoms, then are we offering in the paperwork like a contact to our school nursing staff, or do we have a plan in place where if we have a student athlete or a coach who indicates they have symptoms, a way to get them to a testing site? I know I had to be tested. I had symptoms early on, and Methodist Hospital called me every day until the test results came back. And I know that was in early March, so I know we're further along with what we know about COVID-19.
Yes, sir.
But what do we have for the student athlete or the coach, employee, and are we having the nursing staff come out and do the temperature checks so that our coaches can focus? It's going to be harder for coaches because they're going to have to divide up their teams more. So somebody to help them out.
At this point, we don't have nurses on staff. It would be a coach's responsibility to check those students in as they come in. Ms. Gibson is working with one of the places that test. I don't want to call it out. Ms. Stanley, the First Care, that she would, and so we would, more than likely, our coach, whoever it is, 100.4, you say, no, you can't come in. Folks, it's 100.4, you can't come in. A suggestion is, and then share with that. That would be my only thing at this point. But we could, I guess, make a plan accordingly based on that.
I'll
Here's
kind of
the-
pipe in on that. I think that's exactly kind of the route we need to take. Here's a resource. We don't want to put that on our nursing staff
Okay.
and assume responsibility for testing, treatment, follow-up, referring them to an outside facility. You know, here's where you can go be tested, and then make sure they have something to show before they come back
Okay.
that
Right.
they're
And I think-
temperature-free.
Here's an example that we've been working through when we've been thinking personnel, just re-entering in new and different policies and procedures in August and September, whenever we get to come back. I don't think that we can require them to go get testing, because you could have a kid that has an inner ear infection and has some of those symptoms and has a temp. So I agree with it should be a resource if you think to the parents to go and do that. And then they come back the next day and you go through the checklist of items and you check the temperature, and then the questions and the temperature determine whether or not a staff member can come back to school or a student athlete could re-enter. But I do like the idea of giving them a resource so parents can think about it. We have to prepare that for our staff down the road. We know that. So, yeah. Right. And we've already reached out to the urgent care center to be our partner for staff. But,
Okay, so if a student's denied access to practice, let's say they have a temperature of 101. So what instructions are we giving to the coaching? If the nursing staff's not going to be there, what directions are we giving to the coaches about where to place the student, how to monitor when they're picked up from the practice site?
At this point, they've all established a place that they'll come into the facility by car or whatever else, however they get there. Whether that's a little tent that they stop by before they come through. So if on their way into the facility, whether it's from the Garden Mile entrance or from the Red Unit area, or somebody's meeting down there at the golf course, they'll have a place set up. And once you get to that spot of, hey, I go here, and then if I get cleared, I come on in. Otherwise, it's not in the locker room we're going to be testing. It's in the parking lot away from us. So really, the only thing a coach would say is, be my advice or my thought at this point was, if they have an issue with those questions and that, they don't even come into the site. They'd have to leave at that point, which they'd be with somebody to be able to take them, unless
Asking whoever's transporting the athlete to the.
just, yeah, tested and then move on.
I think that's a good plan, don't you, Kurt?
I just, the more that we can offer out, the better. And I understand what Beth was saying about we don't want to take the responsibility, but we do have a nursing staff. We do have something for employees if we could offer that for the students.
We have
to
to
have
have a training for the coaches, so we'll make sure that we put a slide in there that explains to the coach that responsibility of, here's the little brochure, the whatever we have, information that they can share.
Right.
May I ask a follow-up to, so if they do come in and they do have a high temperature, or they check one of the boxes that is the indicator, so they're turned away that day, is the thought is the next day they come and test and they're fine, they're okay, or do we require some kind of test?
At that point, that's all we'd have to go on, is what they share with us and what their temperature is.
And that's what the Clay Horton and the health department shared when we've been talking to employees. We've kind of talked with Big Rivers also, because they started to screen employees, and it was like, do you mandate that they go get tested if they have 3 of the 5 symptoms, or what? And they were like, no, we just tell them they cannot be at work, and until they can say no to this, and they don't have a temp, then they can come back.
And there are some employers that are requiring, in order to come back to work, if they have symptoms, they are requiring that they get a test and show a negative result before they come back. That's
Or at least seen a medical facility. I've seen them too, that maybe not tested, but they've seen someone in the medical, they've seen a doctor to determine whether they should get tested or not. But Mr. Mike,
Y'all ready?
I'm ready. I'm just listening. Everybody's got great ideas. I love the
help
idea.
we get,
I've got, some of these are great
This is gonna
suggestions.
get interesting. First, I wanna say nothing I'm gonna say is gonna be critical or demeaning of the work that's done. I think the plans are excellent. I really do.
They are. Y'all have done a lot of
And I
stuff.
think there's been a lot covered in them by a lot of folks, and I appreciate that. But I do have to ask several questions. And the first question is, what's different today than it was March 13th with regards to this virus?
We're in a pandemic.
The only difference is.
You don't have to answer it. You don't have to answer a single question I'm gonna ask you,
Okay,
okay?
I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
You don't have to answer one single question, but
No.
we've got to think about this.
Yes, sir.
And there's nobody in here that's been their entire life affected more by athletics than myself. From the time I was 12 years old till I was 24, 25, and continue to be a supporter of Henderson County athletics. Nobody. Maybe Wes a little bit, but not near as much. But the main question I have to ask, and what's incumbent upon us, is ensuring the safety of these youngsters, all right? And then I begin to say, what's different today than March 13th when we closed the schools, sent everybody home, locked them down, and said, we've got a pandemic going on. And I'm going to tell you what's different. There's been 2 million people in this country, 2 million impacted and infected, and 110,000 people died, all right? Now, in the state of Kentucky, we're not near the level. However, I'm going to say that on May 23rd, 24th, Kentucky went for about 5, 6, 7 days of level 120, 130 reported new cases. 8 days after Memorial Day, the new cases in Kentucky jumped to 691 on 6/3, 690 some odd brand new cases. 3 days ago, a 9-month-old baby died. All right, and I'm not trying to discourage anybody. I think that what I'm trying to say is, and we only got one chance to get this right.
Yes,
One
sir.
chance to get it right and we've done a lot of work to try and get it right. However, I'm concerned that we may be rushing because there's some anxious kids and anxious parents, and I've got no question that physical activity and athletics are important. They're a major part of our education program for a lot of youngsters. And again, I'm one that was affected significantly by it. But University of Alabama has kids coming in voluntary, and they got 5 cases right now that the entire football team's infected, voluntary workouts. Iowa State has got infected kids. Arizona has infected kids. Utah, the state of Utah, has seen their new cases of infection triple in the last 2 weeks. And this pandemic business is still out there, all right? It has not gone away. So what's different today than March 13th? The safety of our kids is paramount. The safety of our kids is incumbent upon us. I'd love to see them out there. I want to see them out there. I want to see them participating. But just because the KHSAA says, okay, we've lost a little money here, we canceled everything to do with spring sports, everything.
Yes, sir.
Major League Baseball has not started. The NBA basketball has not started. NFL football has said the earliest they're going to get going is July 22nd at facilities that are isolated to specific teams. Now, the biggest transmission method is not how clean your buildings are. It's people to people, all right? I mean, the biggest transmission, the biggest means of this thing going from one group to another is by person to person. And masks keep an infected person, hopefully, from infecting another one. Masks keep you from breathing in. What about these asymptomatic folks? There's folks walking around that have the coronavirus. They don't even know it. They don't have temperature. They don't have cough. They got it. How are we going to test for those? You don't have to answer that question.
Yes, sir.
All right? I'm reluctant, and I'm at the position right now that I'm not ready for us to start bringing 100 kids out, 50 kids out in groups of 10. I work with 3 youngsters right now, all right? Love them to death. Wouldn't do anything to jeopardize their health. And I've got room to keep them from here to me and you away from each other. But I don't have eyes in the back of my head. And they're touching each other, and they're around each other. They're lifting weights, and I've got to be within arm's length to spot them. And we're talking about spotters and weightlifting being 6 feet away.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to see us do something right now. And I know everybody wants these kids to get back involved. Everybody wants these kids to do something. Everybody wants to see these kids get outside. The plans that you put together, in my opinion, are excellent for cross country, golf. I really think so. And I don't think there's any question about the safety as long as we adhere to what's going on. But I don't think that we could clean a weight room enough to eliminate the transmission from one asymptomatic kid to everybody in the group. And then that kid somehow or another gets touching when they're transferring from group to group, one kid in another group, whether it be in weightlifting. We've already gotten direction from the KHSAA that no gyms are to be open, gymnasiums.
Right.
Not even thought about being open. But we're thinking about opening weight rooms because we can clean them. And I try to keep my weight stuff clean. And I mean, think about this. Every little hole on every weight. And how do you know which kid goes? Folks, I don't want to see us jumping into something that we're not sure of. We don't know where this thing is. And what the big question is, what is different today than March 13th? We don't have a verified treatment. No verified treatment yet. No vaccine. And again, we don't even know how we're going to start schools yet. We don't know how we're going to start school and open school yet. We don't know whether it's going to open August 26th. We don't know whether we're going to be going with half the schools and the other half going non-traditional. And to sit here and say that next Monday we're going to have all the kids come and pick up physicals and papers and this and that, and then a week from that day we're going to be breaking into groups of 10 and going into the weight room, and I'm not ready for that. And I want you to know I'm not ready, and I will not. I'll vote no on the timing, only the timing. Now, we had a dead period set in here by KHSAA until July 6th, 13th, something like that. And I think we ought to use that time to see what's going on. Because, again, 8 days after Memorial Day, Kentucky spiked to 691. We look at states that when we were given directions on how a state should open up, 24 different states were showing increases, and they're still opening up. And their new infected cases are increasing. And today, we've got 24, not all the same 24, where they're still showing new cases at a higher level than they were 3 weeks ago. Not met the guidelines that were put down by the CDC. I'm not at a point where I'm ready to rush this business of getting kids all together. Now, I do have some alternatives and thoughts. I mean, I'm not being critical. I think your work has been excellent. It really has. It's been excellent. And Beth, you're going to have to hit me on the head right now, because I would like to see us not do anything until sometime in July, whether it be after what would have been the normal dead period. But I would also like to say that and I don't know where the money's going to come from. I don't know where the effort, maybe we can get it done at one of these free places. Every kid that wants to be involved, I think should have a test prior to being involved. That eliminates some of the asymptomatic folks. In my opinion, it might. In Texas, they're encouraging, haven't required yet, and I don't think we can require, that youngsters have weekly tests. I had a test done Monday, less than 24 hours later, for the antigens and the coronavirus. Knew within 24 hours what the results were. Negative, by the way. And
Congratulations.
and the only reason I did it was because if you look at the CDC directions,
Sure.
this country was, before we opened up, was said we should be doing almost 500,000 tests a day. That's somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.5%, 3%. Kentucky, to this day, has only done 260,000 out of 4.4 million total since March till now. From March till now, Kentucky's only tested 260-some thousand. They have one of the best test processes, and it's been given high accords by a lot of different people, but folks aren't going. Folks aren't doing it. There have been free tests set up at community college. One day had 7 folks. Maybe we can work something out between now and if we kind of delayed this one more month, where all of our youngsters could get a free test by one of these new free test places coming in. But I want you to know, and maybe we can set up where we have each of these youngsters that are involved in the high touch, especially the high touch, where there are weekly tests or something of that magnitude. I know I'm dreaming. I may be dreaming. But I know that in the state of Texas, who they think football is fantastic,
Yes, sir.
they're saying they're not starting until they know that the youngsters don't have it by a negative test, and that they're encouraging youngsters for weekly tests some way, shape, or form. And signing a piece of paper that says they have and do not have any of the symptoms, have not been exposed to anybody with the symptoms. But the biggest question on there is, what about the asymptomatic folks? They're out there. And the state of Kentucky's tested 5-point-some% of the total population, 4.5 million, over the last 3 months. We're testing at less than 0.1% a day. And what the recommendation was, somewhere in the neighborhood of 0.3 to 0.4% a day. These are experts coming up with this stuff. And I know our health department, and I don't disagree with them, have said we've got excellent plans on how to deal with this from groups gathering together. But it's not because we keep everything clean. This thing is from person to person. That's how it's transmitted, person to person. And you wait and see after what's happened the last 8 days, the spikes that are going to be going up with all these people that have been out gathering together with groups, some people with masks, some don't. And we're saying that we're not going to make them wear a mask, and if they don't want to wear a mask when they're in the sport, I mean, we're this thing is for real for me. And of course, I'm in that age group that really, really is old. And I know I'm getting really, really old. But I mean, older folks are impacted. And when these kids are with our coaches for an hour, there's no doubt in my mind those coaches are going to be really cognizant of what's going on. They're going to be really conscientious of how these kids are dealt with, really conscientious about what is cleaned in between there. I know that. I know these coaches. But what about when they leave? Who they're going to be exposed to and when? So how do we know? By temperature? Don't buy it. If you're exposed today and you've got the virus, you may not show the temperature till 4 to 7 to 8 days later. I don't want to see us jumping into something right now because we're anxious. Another group or state or somebody has already said that. I think we've got time. And I would not have any qualms with the plans, but delaying them till sometime July 6th, July 13th. I wouldn't have any qualms with every one of our coaches meeting with the kids in some form or fashion, at 10 at a time to explain to them, here is what I would like for you to be doing between now and July the whatever, when the dead period is coming, when we could anticipate that we've got a little more time. And I know that between July 13th or June 15th, that's not a magic date. I know that. It's not magic. But time is what we need on this thing. And the lack of time of exposure is what has prevented this in Kentucky from getting as bad as it has been in Indiana, Tennessee, Missouri, Arkansas. What our governor did prevented a lot of this stuff. So I hate to be the one bearing bad news, and I'm only one person on this board. But
I could share that we talked and had a long talk, and then also on Monday, and then we listened to Mr. Tackett on one of the webinars that Ms. Stanley does often.
Tuesday, the commissioner, we have webinar every Tuesday.
And so he spoke. Mr. Tackett spoke during that time, and one of the comments that he said is, we're talking about sports and athletics, and we hadn't even figured out how to open schools yet. And so that one
it's
stuck
my
to me.
issue.
Yeah, that one stuck to me,
Pressure.
and I think that's where the bulk of it comes from. And when you ask a question or when you seek more input on the 13 pages, usually the response is these are guides. Check with your health department and your board, which in a sense to me says we're going to give you these guides, and then it's on you five and Ms. Stanley and a health department to say yes or no. And if the guide's already printed in 13 pages, it makes it a tough situation for you all. And
Well, other than my editorialized comments, Kirk and Wes both asked excellent questions of how do you know how do you know their temperature's been taken? What do you do when you find the temperature, and where are they going to be going, and whether they're going to be recommended? I mean, we've just been here for 45 minutes and come up with 3 pages of stuff you probably need to do right now.
Yep.
That doesn't even hit the emotional stuff that I've tried to deal with. I mean, this thing is out there. It's real, and I'm not ready for it.
The other part.
And I will share.
Oh, sorry.
was
The other
gonna say-
part is maybe we haven't even been cleared for competitions.
Yeah.
And so-
And I'll tell you right now, if someone were to ask me right now, at the safety of these kids, I wouldn't have one iota of canceling everything to do with fall athletics right now.
Sure.
I would vote in favor of it for the safety of the kids. Make people mad. You see what that says?
Yes, sir.
I've been a supporter forever, all right, and I wore it on purpose. But the fact of the matter is, the safety of these kids is what's paramount here, and that's what's incumbent upon us making a decision.
Yes, sir.
The anxiousness of, and the desire, and the governor saying, yeah, it's good for these kids. Yeah, I know it's good. Give them some direction, give them some guidelines, and let them go work out somewhere. And if they've got the motivation to do it on their own, which I've got 3 that are doing it on their own, And you tell them they can't do it one day, and they'll argue till West can't stand up.
Well,
And I can assure you, we appreciate your comments and the questions. It is new territory for all of us, and we work at the pleasure of the board. And whatever you all determine today, we will smile when we leave here. And, I mean, we truly will. That's not I just want to share that with you, that we're here seeking the advice and having you all have to make a pretty tough decision on the safety and health of our kids. So we support truly.
Ms. Robin, can you run that timeline back down a little bit to where we started? I'm trying to look at that while they're talking, and the first was June the 1st.
yes, ma'am.
June
And
1st?
the only
Okay.
reason I had June the 1st was because this
For
came
COVID.
out on the Friday before
Right.
June the 1st.
Right. And when was typical dead period?
Oh, the first 2 weeks in July, somewhere around there.
June 25th through July 9th.
July 9th is typical dead. Okay. Okay, I was just trying to get some dates. He was talking dates, and I couldn't see it up there, so that's why I was asking.
No, those are all winter dates. I mean, it could be.
Well, if you look at the calendar, I think the 13th is a Monday and the 6th is a Monday. And I think the dead period ran from a Friday through the 6th, and the 6th this year was the day they could start something. Might have been the 13th.
Yeah, 13th is a Monday, yeah,
Right.
Monday, and I think that might have been the time when we get out and start.
of
doing
July.
something. And that's why I brought it up as the 13th.
Right.
Let's look at the week of the 6th, because the week of the 6th, my thinking, all right, and I'm not thinking logical, I'm not thinking like a parent wants to get their kids into athletics. I'm thinking of the say, maybe the 6th, we put everything off a month until the 6th.
And that's the Monday after the 4th of July weekend, do you realize?
But also
I'm just
saying
thinking there
that
could have been a lot of people exposed that
Maybe
weekend.
that's the 13th, then we start, but I'm also thinking, maybe we should have every youngster tested. Maybe we should look into some of this, where is the free testing? And I don't know that it can or can't be done. I don't know what a test costs. I really don't. But maybe we can get one of these groups down here and sometime test these youngsters, knowing that, okay, we're gonna start, and we're gonna, every kid that wants to, let's get them tested. Every kid's required to have a physical, right? No questions about it. They've gotta have a physical, right? We're in a pandemic, coronavirus. Maybe we can say every youngster that's gonna be involved in athletics, beginning in whatever, must have a negative coronavirus test within a period. That doesn't mean they're good forever. I know that. But at least we know we're starting and they've been tested. And maybe we screen out some of those asymptomatic ones. And I'm not playing on your emotions. I'm just telling you what's different today than it was March 13th. 110,000 people died in 2 days, got back. That's what's different.
Ms. Morgana, do we know other districts around us, have they already chosen what weeks they're going to begin this? Do we have a clue what the rest of the folks around us are doing?
Most of them are doing exactly what we're doing right now. We
Okay.
received the guidelines Friday, at 6 o'clock. So Monday and Tuesday, they've been meeting with their athletic directors. They've been pushing them to their CDCs or to their local health departments.
Right.
And then
They're going to their
meeting
boards
with
just
their
like we are,
boards.
so they've not
Mhm.
made a decision. No one's
Right.
said this is what we're gonna pick yet. They're making the same decisions we are right now.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Because I wouldn't be opposed to, if everybody else is gonna open a certain date, wait and see. Is there a spike? Is there issues with that? If that's the case, then we've waited, we've done the good thing. If everybody opens at the same time, you know, there's people traveling back and forth between all these counties. Everybody works and lives in different places, so I'm not saying that,
I hear what you're saying, and my point about bringing up the dead period, we weren't going to be able to do anything during the dead period anyway.
every year.
And every year it's like that. And there's nothing different for football, nothing different for band, nothing different for soccer, nothing different for anybody else if we waited until July when the normal dead period was over, or July 13th or whatever date it is, when the normal dead period would have been done. But we have all this in place. We bring and meet with our kids and give them the physicals paper and ask them to get a coronavirus test to show that they were negative. And then on July the 13th, if there hadn't been something crazy go on, boom, we start out and let these folks do under these guidelines and plans, and we've given it some time to see where we are. We're not depriving these kids of anything, because I would encourage all these coaches to somehow or another meet with these kids, whether it be in the Google business or however we can, and give them athletic guidelines of, hey, here's the things that you can be doing. Here's a workout that you can be that doesn't require weights or doesn't require special equipment, that says you can be doing this. I used to get it every year from my coach when I went home. Every year, this is when you come back to school, this is what you better done. That's that. And he'd know real quick if I hadn't done it.
Ms. Tracy, you got any comments on this before I go back to other folks?
I've just been listening to what, especially what you all have been talking about. I think, our utmost responsibility is the safety of these kids. That's it. And if it's a tough decision to make about not letting everything start up, I'm totally for that. I don't think, like Mike said, we haven't even decided when we're going to start to school. We haven't, So I know it's different that we're starting the school, but I think jumping in and starting athletics here in the next week or so is, I don't agree with that, but.
Just wanted to hear your thoughts. Kirk, I think you had another question or comment, or Wes, one of you?
So,
Has there been any, I'm sorry, Kirk.
no, so here, I thought this was going to be like a really kind of quick and easy. Then I've heard everybody else, and I'm like, I've got like a whole bunch of more questions.
Sorry, Kirk, I didn't mean to get in there on your emotions.
We're being leader of the packs. We're
Yeah. So here are some questions. So I would like this item placed on the June regular agenda, if for nothing, as a discussion item, maybe action. But I would like to hear because we're just 2 weeks away from our regular meeting. These would be some questions I've had just sitting here, because it's not too long until we decide what's the restart for the academic year. So, and I thought, well, these would be my overarching questions that I would have. So maybe this is a good time to start. What would be the factors to close a sport? So let's just say that when we begin our summer athletics, what decisions would, Margana, would you and your staff, what factors would you consider? And then let's just say that we had a positive result from a student athlete. I'm going to pick football or band because they're big. Then do you close practice for 9 days? Do you close everything down like we would on a snow day? Do you keep some? Okay, so they practiced at X spot, but we have another athletic team that practices at the country club, and so we're going to let them, their spot's not where an outbreak happened. And I would have the same question for whenever it is that we go back into school buildings. So if we had I think the media is using the term hotspot. So if we had a hotspot at an elementary school, would we close that elementary school but keep the rest of the district open? Would we shift kids? How would we let students?
You get deep now.
Yeah, I was like,
No,
I didn't realize I had so many, but this would be a great time to start fleshing out those answers and putting together a flow chart of decision making, especially we have a transition period coming for the whole district. And then what would be our stance on contact tracing? So I know that we didn't want to take the responsibility, but that seems to be making more of a headline in the news. And then if coaches can be meeting with their athletes, then what measures? We're a strong academic district, and nobody would argue that NTI is not the best quality. It wasn't the best quality of teaching for me as a teacher. So, but well, like, can we go ahead and start working with our student athletes, even if they're not practicing or conditioning, going ahead and having those coaches or maybe summer school teachers go ahead and start with that small group of students, helping, find out where those gaps are, and that might inform decision making for when we start back in mass with all 7,000 students. Like what worked over the summer for finding a gap, what worked as an intervention in this small group with student athletes, then we could maybe apply that to the greater. I had one more. And then I would like to know what the anticipated costs would be. Like, do we already possess thermometers? Do we already possess gloves and masks? All that kind of stuff, because I'm sure that that's going to be. But the most important one is, well, what factors would you use to close? And then would you close one, close all? How would you go about closure?
There
Sure.
hasn't been any
And-
discussion about interscholastic competitions yet either, has it?
No.
No competitions.
So we certainly already planned to put that on the
Okay.
June 15th board meeting, and each of the task force committees, we're going to give you all a report of how far along they are. Not all of those. There's some questions you asked that we will need to explore. Absolutely, Kirk. But we are certainly working on those for the reopening piece. And so the committees are working right now on their PowerPoint presentation to share with you where are we instructionally, where do we think we are logistically with what we know, and where are we with personnel as far as what we know so far. And I can share with you from 12 to about 12:45 we were on a Google Hangout with superintendents east of us. So that's the Davis County, Owensboro Independent, Hancock, Ohio. Hopkins hops on that one too, though. And with Clay Horton from the Green River Health, talking about a couple of those also. And some of them are a little too early to answer, because when we hit the middle of July, the third week in July, expectations of mask versus not masks, expectations of how many kids can we put on a bus, how many kids can we not put on a bus, one seat in between, 2 kids in a seat with masks. All of that will change in 4 to 5 more weeks, because that's how we evolve with the pandemic. We look at the data, as Mike said, for them to make guidelines. And so, yes, we absolutely will give you a thorough update of where we think we are right now, and open discussion just like what we have. We also have talked a little bit about, we have our regular meeting on June 15th, and we'll do that, knowing to reopen school and how everything changes every 2 to 3 weeks. The guidelines, the statistics, the expectations. We may want to have 2 meetings in July just to keep communication and conversations going, because people in the community, I know, are starting to ask questions. I was asked 2 days ago, are you going to expect our kids to wear masks? Because if you are, I'm sending mine to signature school. My response is, we will follow the CDC guidelines, and whatever those guidelines are when we open is what they'll be. Well, but I need to know, because I need to, I want to know too, dude. That's all I can tell you. But, so that's a long answer to, yes, I welcome those questions, and absolutely, we will work on them. Yes, you're welcome.
Wes? And I was waiting for you all to come up with what all these guidelines were, waiting to sit and listen to it. And yes, there were a lot of good things brought up, and I'm with Mike. I love what you all have done. But I'm also, that's why I asked if there were any other counties around us who had already made these decisions. I'm more of the opinion of, let somebody else start and let's see how this goes, and then and if it goes great, 2 weeks later we'll start ours. But if it doesn't go great, we're going to be glad that we didn't start ours. Does that make sense? And I don't want to make everybody else outside of us the guinea pig, but at the same time, like everyone says, we're responsible for Henderson County kids. We're not responsible for all of Kentucky's kids. We're responsible for 7,000. And I have said, being on this board, to many community members who have disagreed with votes that I have taken or stances that I have done. And their answer is always, well, I'm not going to elect you next time. Well, that's always happened, right? But my answer to them has always been, I don't answer to you, I answer to 7,000 kids. And in my heart, that's where it is, just like Mike said. Yeah, they can push me all they want to, but if it's not right for our kids and not right for our district, I can't agree with it. And that politically may not be correct, but I haven't been politically correct for 12 years. Why start today? So I'm of
We
the opinion that I
appreciate
agree with
your-
Tracy and Mike, if you want to know the short answer.
We appreciate your comments, and our goal was to get something before you to hear your pleasure.
Right.
And we will do whatever you elect to do.
I know you will,
but
Steve.
That's the information that we wanted to get to you, so you could make an informed decision.
Right.
And we support whatever path you need us to take, and if it's a partial thing where it's this is okay, but this is not, you let us
Right.
try to wade
The
through
one
the
person
weeds
we
on it.
haven't heard from in all this thing, other than Steve sitting over in the corner, is Mr. Mark Andrews. So I'm going to give you time to get your 5 minutes worth in.
Okay,
or
well,
more.
I was going to speak about the individual plans for each sport, which sounds like that may not be needed at this point because we'll be moving forward maybe in a different direction. I will say,
I think
you
I
asked,
spent all those sleepless nights for nothing right now, right?
right. I will say that I tried to contact someone in Hopkins County, 2 people earlier today, to find out what they had because I spent a few years teaching down there, so I kind of know some people. And what I found out was on the 2nd, which was Tuesday, their board I think only approved the 1st through 14th, where you can meet with kids to pass out information and that type of stuff. But their June 15th and forward it just said forthcoming. So evidently they haven't decided anything on that. So I don't know if that's something that we want to, just as an option, think about doing. Or we could, in 2020, we have a lot of resources electronically here. So, maybe we don't have to have the kids come to campus to meet with them, to disseminate information for them, to know what workout they should be doing or just to keep them involved. I know that KHSA was speaking, part of their discussion was the mental health of kind of resuming normal activities. And that first 2 weeks, that was kind of the idea of allowing kids to come to campus to meet, following the social distancing guidelines, no more than 10 at a time. But just to kind of get that feeling like, okay, well, my sport is starting back up and things are kind of getting back to normal and I can get out of the house for a while. And this is just my personal opinion. They're probably getting out of the house anyway, running around with all their friends, So, I mean,
I'm sure we're responsible for the mental health part of that part is what
Right.
it is.
But, we definitely want to follow guidelines to a T because I agree with what you're saying wholeheartedly about the goal here, whatever it is the safety of the kids. So, coaches will be disappointed if we can't meet for a while, but they'll get over it,
I don't answer to them either.
Right.
And I'm not trying to be mean,
Yeah,
Mr.
yes, ma'am,
Andrews.
I know.
I'm not. I'm trying to say from my heart that's where that is.
Right.
And there's been a lot of things that we didn't agree with and didn't like in the last 3 to 4 months. It is what it is.
Right.
We've had to save ourselves.
Yes, ma'am. And I will, like Ms. Stanley said, I'm going to leave here smiling. This is my first experience with the board. I'm glad it's not a packed room, and because I'd probably be a little bit more nervous. But I understand that you guys have tough decisions to make, and whatever you say goes. We can only present to you, kind of what we think using the guidelines. And I'm not saying that I disagree that we shouldn't be together, but the idea in my mind was, okay, if we're going to be allowed to do this, then this is how we want to do it. And but I'm fine, if and when you guys
Can,
delay that.
can we back up to something else that Mr. Mike brought up about the testing? If we can we find some information out before we make that decision of whether just we're going to allow a physical or whether we're going to need a physical and testing at a certain date?
I think that's
somebody do
probably
some
a
good information?
good thing to bring back because if we require it, we'll have to pay for it.
Right,
if
but we
there's
need
not a
some
free
information. We need some
testing.
cost information and
Right.
some details as to where can that be done. Physically, how can you get that accomplished? And B, what's it going to cost us? Or do we have a group, organization, maybe through the state or through one of the medical places that's willing to come up and say, we're going to test you for free? I mean, Kroger came out there and did all those tests out at the college, and Deaconess is now taking over Methodist. Can we say, we're going to be your test subjects? Can we get you to come out here and test all of our athletes and our band members? Can we just check into some possibilities, I guess is what it is, and cost? And then we can decide, yes, we're going to require it, or no, we're going to highly suggest it.
Sure.
Does that
Yes,
make sense for you?
absolutely, we can. I have that on our list, and
May I bring up the fact that, and this has been on our calendar for a while, but if we're going to delay things, starting on, or this Monday, the 9th, is that right? It's Monday the 9th? 8th, Monday the 8th. It may be the 9th. I'm sorry, I would have to look. I think it's Monday. And the 18th. Yes, it's the 8th and the 18th. We have physicals planned. Baker Chiropractic was coming to the high school to give physicals to kids that wanted to come in and pay the physical fee to get their physical completed. But the plan was to take temperature when they came in, ask them, keep social distancing. They had to, all the coaches were to make appointments. The parents were to make appointments to know what time, so that we didn't have a group of people waiting. It would be more like, all right, well, I'm next, but they're not done yet, so I know to wait here, But is that something we need to cancel and delay?
I do. I think we need to postpone that
postpone that? Is
because
that
it
something
would be
we've done
good when they're
So we've done in
getting.
the past? Okay.
We have.
Because we've always had medical places that
As a
would do them for free, so
Yeah.
Yeah,
when did
and
this?
it's a nice feature for our families and kids. But when when the physician is doing that, we would want at that same time to be able to tell them, yes, you have to go get a COVID screen, or no, you don't, or so.
Yeah, I would,
I certainly would. I
Yeah.
would postpone that.
I would, yes.
How we've done it at school is sometimes we have better luck at getting a lot of our kids to be able to come there instead of making an appointment to go somewhere else. So we've done it, for several years where we have them come in, but that's only for convenience for our kids, just to be able to get them there. That's
Yeah, and
all
I'm
it
not-
is.
I'm not sure I'm a fan of that this year at all, but that's another discussion, so. It's another whole group of
I
people
just wanna
coming
make
into
sure
one
that
high
we
school.
don't- I
That's
just want
what's
to make
the
sure that we don't
difference of
allow something if we're
bringing all the
if we're
football
delaying,
team in, you know what I'm saying? And yeah, okay. Yes, sir. Yes, Kurt, go ahead.
I think it's great that coaches could meet with their athletes online or
I don't have a problem with them doing virtual meetings to meet with them, and maybe that's where we broach this information and say, look, our board has decided this, this, and this, but we want you to all start getting involved. I mean, there's been lots of groups, school groups and other groups that have been doing yoga sessions and all kinds of exercises all spring, all summer long together on Zoom. That doesn't mean that these kids can't get together and do it on Zoom. I mean, if the Hugh Sandifer Center can hold a Zuma class once a week all together, I can't see why we can't do it too. That would be a good time to them to get disseminate some information, I guess is what I'm saying. So, board members, what do you think about voting to approve them meeting with their kids?
I kind of have
Virtually?
a question, just an overall question.
Sure, go ahead.
So these guidelines were passed down from the governor, right, down to us as far as we came up with our solution for our county, reviewed it with the local health departments,
Yes, sir.
got consensus with them. They're good.
Yes.
Okay.
Governor, yeah,
handed us these guidelines, not the governor. The KHSAA board
Okay.
developed the guidelines.
They indicated that they were going to follow the governor's guidelines because they're a state entity of,
The youth sports. As soon as that opened, KHSAA was on.
No, I'm just wanting to clarify. I mean, this health professionals have looked at this and they feel that it's acceptable at this point in time is the point I'm trying to make. So I just don't know what else we wait for to take action if we're getting guidance from professionals that this is their job to do. I understand. I want the health of the kids more than anyone. I've got 2 kids in the system. Both of them are in athletics. Right. But still, kind of have to rely on professionals. That's their job to do it. That's my only input on it. I did have some questions on the school specifics, but I don't think that's
If we
going to
need
be a
to,
point
if I need to
today.
discuss those, I certainly will.
Yeah, it was just the cross country on the middle school had a 50 limit, 3 coaches, and I didn't know if it was 10 per coach. So the math didn't really add up on that.
Did you say cross country middle school?
Yeah, at North.
Okay. I'm not sure about the middle school.
And then on the high school, the cross country, and I don't think either of the golf ones even specified a limit, but those are my only questions on that.
Those were typically the smaller sports wouldn't have up to 10, and they left that off. The 50 at one of the middle schools, I believe, was because they're an outdoor sport, and they were going to specify it to be that first group goes, the second group goes, and this other group goes. But yes, that was a larger number as well. And that was, once again, we had to wait until 12 o'clock to get an answer on that. So it
Right, and I
was
know you
tough.
kind of mentioned it was mainly maybe by coach, so I didn't know if it needed to be 30 was my point, but because there were 3 coaches.
Right, you're right.
I do know that the boys golf, I talked to the coach and he said that they only expected to have maybe 7 kids that showed interest last year. But if there were more than 7 kids, they could split that up into 2 groups with a separate entrance and exit. And cross country, I haven't spoken to that coach, but those numbers are always really small as well. And I think that I think
Or
that's going to
middle
be
school, or middle school is larger.
the middle school. Yes, the middle school, and I may be wrong here, but I thought in our meeting on Monday that we said that they may not start until July, when the number is 50 anyway.
They wanted to start
Starting early.
early.
Okay, okay.
For just that sport.
Okay.
And then the rest of the sports, they
Right.
said, we don't want to mess with until after the dead period. So the only sport that was going to gain traction or gain something early was the cross country.
Okay.
That's for the middle school, not the high school.
That's the middle school.
Okay. Wes, not Wes, Kirk, your final thoughts? Too many people here. No?
I'm more than happy to approve if we need to do anything through the June 14th, and then we meet June 15th anyway.
I have a question.
Go ahead. What?
On this action that's required on this general athletic guidelines, are we talking, because it's been really hard to hear you guys today, are we talking dates for when we're gonna start?
Yeah,
Specific
in
dates?
there's a timeline listed in
Third page.
those, right? And so I think I would recommend, if the board would consider at this point, approving the general athletic guidelines and removing the timeline as presented. And then I've got another motion after that.
Is that a recommendation you're making right now?
Yes.
I would make a motion that we accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the guidelines without a timeline and dates as presented.
I'll second that. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, got that motion carried.
So
Yes,
then the
ma'am?
next piece, when we're looking at the timeline, taking into consideration the questions that have been asked to us as the administration today, and safety and the health of our students being at the
Paramount.
pivotal point, absolutely paramount. I would make the recommendation that coaches be allowed to meet individually, like through Google, through an avenue for communication basis only, for general information, just to reunite a coach with a player through the month of June. And, go ahead. Clarify
I'm not sure I
anything.
understand. A coach meet individually through.
So in the general guidelines, it says like from June 1st to the 14th, coaches can make contact with their players to give them basic information. So they might be able to give information if we reschedule when there's a physical. Or they might be able to give the information as far as expectations and guidelines. And when we do return, these are the things that have to be in place.
Person or in a, or
You all advise us.
I would prefer that
We
be
do it either way.
virtual.
I just think they should be allowed to make contact, but it can be whatever the board's pleasure is. Or I guess you could say nothing till July 6th. I just want to clarify that so we can,
in my comments that I was making, I was encouraging the fact that a coach could contact. I was encouraging that a coach could contact the players of his sport, whether they be in small group meetings, as long as we social just like we're doing here, to give expectations of what, or give directions of what could be done from today till when we make a decision that we're going to start athletics in groups, whether it be after the dead period or whether, and that'd be the earliest in my opinion. That's just my opinion, is that would be after what was the regular scheduled dead period, no sooner. But between now and then, because we do have this waiver, that the coaches could meet either online or in groups of 10 as
groups of
way.
10, I think is important.
It's groups of 10, as long as we maintain social distancing, just to give them expectations, just to give them, as you had said, Mark, too, hey, here we are, this is what we're looking at. We had some ding-dong on the board said we can't do what they're doing now and all this kind of stuff, which I don't mind.
So ending what date, Mike? What were you saying? Ending June 30th? Morgana,
I
what
don't
date
know.
did you say to begin with?
I thought the dead period started June 29th, that last week of June. No, I thought it was the next week of July.
It is close to that. I'm fairly certain. I tried to look it up a second ago. I am fairly certain that it's always June 25th through July 9th. The last day you can practice is the 24th of June, and then you have to stay off, and the next day you can come back is July 10th.
Yeah,
Say again,
yeah,
Beth.
so it's usually 2 weeks.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll just say after traditional dead period, and we'll search for exactly when that start and stop time is.
Even if you gave guidance to be able to meet the 10 with the social distance until June 15th, that gives them a chance to mentally see them or to log in and see them, give them an expectation of, hey, you better be able to run the mile this fast when you get back. These are some workouts you can do. This is stuff you got to have. And then that's all. And then by the 15th, we may have another decision after the board. Well, if the board is going to, yeah, the June 15th meeting is what I think the sheriff's for.
But that gives them all next week, in other words, to do it virtually or in small groups. Is a week going to be enough time? What are you saying, Beth? You're shaking your head.
In doing it is that we're very specific in what is allowed. Because if you tell a coach that they can meet with 10 players to discuss what they need to be working on, I could potentially interpret that as, here, let me show you what you need to be working on. As opposed to, here is a workout for the week, you go and do it on your own. I think we just need to be very specific so we don't we don't set a coach up to, innocently make a mistake or not be clear as to, I can work one-on-one with a player or I can work with 3 players on individual skills as opposed to just contacting them. I think that's
It
just an
is-
important.
Sure, in the general guidelines, it is pretty specific to that. When it says June 1st through the 14th, general basic information given for expectations. So to me, those, no, or go back up just a little bit. There you go. That last one. That the coaches and all of us across the state get what that means. That you can contact, you can give that basic information, but it's not like what you said. And it's more specific than just that in the document.
Document,
In the
because what we're
document.
seeing
I-
is the shortened
So
version.
your recommendation was that between now and the end of June, the coaches could do that
June
specific
1st
as
through
you
14th. Right.
Didn't you say through the month of June?
Yes, till after the regular dead period. Is that what you all are thinking?
Yes.
No? End of July.
No, it's in two.
Right.
Say to the end of June, you can say to the end of June, but you can't.
No, I meant that first week in July too, but.
I did too. I did too. Anytime during,
I would
between
s-
now and then when
Right.
that dead period, that they could meet virtually, give out expectations, but most of them are all gonna get it early so they can get them kids working, is what I'm thinking.
I'd say if you give them until the 26th to meet with them, and knowing that after our meeting on the 15th, more additional information may come. And I think the coaches are going to jump on it and try to do it all next week. But at least they've got until the 26th, if there's a student that's not back here, that they can meet with them.
I'd give them that flexibility through whatever July, the dead period we're calling. But
I
you're
would-
right. If
whatever-
it was
I
me,
was
I'd
gonna
get them
say-
all out next week.
Right. I would say you all determine that end date. We're going to abide by it. We understand that they can do the general basic information. But I don't want to say to the coaches that we will all determine on June 15th the next step.
No, we don't know that.
Because we may not have all of that
Figured out.
ready yet, to be honest. That's where we may have to have a special board meeting towards the end or that first week of July, and we'll know more just about school as general to
Well, just to do
reopening.
that first little, coaches meet, speak to students, general basic information. If you've given them till almost the last week in June, that's plenty of time.
Was that what your original comment or thought was? Or till the, and I'm looking at you, Morgana. And that's the motion I'm gonna make, just what
It gives them a
Morgana
broad-
recommended.
Gives them a broad brush.
Let's just go to June 28th. Let's just do that. They've got all the month of June to contact the
Month of
kids. Let's
June.
do it.
They've got till
Motion
June
made.
28th.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion
You
carried.
get that, Robin? You know what that was? Wes will tell you what it was. He'll write it for you.
Yeah. Robin, can you read it back to us or let whatever he just said? Not sure? When you get it written down, could you send a copy to Mr. Kirk? Maybe send a copy to all of us. Would that be nice? Thank you. That way, at least when somebody asks us in the community, we know what we said and voted on.
Yes, like I wanna make sure that what I just said yes to is what I think I said.
My understanding.
People watching on YouTube
Right.
now, so.
My understanding was that we'll do the basic general information between now and June 28th.
Yes, ma'am.
That
All
was
that's
it.
in that
Just plain
first-
and simple.
Plain
Plain
and
and simple.
And if anybody asks us about the next phases, we don't know yet. That's undetermined. The next phases is undetermined.
So, Madam Chair, I would request then that the sports-specific guideline be tabled and postponed until the next meeting where we talk about athletics.
Yes.
I definitely want to vote on that.
Nobody's asked you to vote here lately, have they?
Yeah, the voice, the head is talking.
Table that.
The head's talking. You want to make that motion that we table this till the next time?
Amen.
Yeah. We want to table the specific guidelines.
Yeah,
And it's more
table.
about the dates than it is the details.
Please
But that
comment.
gives you an opportunity to fill in some of the gaps in the details that you all didn't have answers to, correct?
Please make that recommendation one more time. I wasn't paying attention. I'm kind of dumb, pal.
So, Madam Chair, members of the board, I would respect your consideration of agenda items, sports-specific guidelines, be tabled for a further discussion and agenda item.
I'll make a motion. We accept the superintendent's recommendation as presented.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Tracy. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Are we all good? Am I smiling across the bridge over here? Mr. Andrews says he's going to leave smiling no matter what, so he's smiling. I'm good. Okay. I think that's all of it. Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn this lovely meeting?
Tracy did, and I'll second it.
Okay. Kirk made it and Mike seconded it. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. You got left out, Tracy. Sorry. Bye, Tracy. Bye, talking head.
Bye. See ya. Have a good weekend.
He's commenting on your hair, how it looks nice.